Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be looking at the Poison and Bone Tree of the Necromancer, and we had just finished the Poison Nova ability, so I hope you liked that video. Now we're going to be moving on to the Bone skills, so we're going to start out with Teeth. Teeth is not a very good ability, and in fact I think the only real usefulness it has is number one, PvP, and number two, it's decent in the early levels of the game when you like first start. And the main reason why this ability is not very good has to do with the fact that it doesn't hit more than once. So it's kind of a silly ability, and we need to go to a character that has a relatively low level so I can show you kind of like the progression and the way that this ability works, as opposed to just simply throwing you directly in. So when you first get Teeth, or should I say Tooth? When you first get Tooth, because I'm pretty sure like when you first get the ability and you put like your first point into it, it's pretty much just Tooth, not Teeth. And like I'm gonna go ahead and drop my charms over here real quick so we can really get like the lowest of the low. So literally, when you get Tooth, it's I'm making jokes here. When you get your first skill point in Teeth, you have a whole 2 teeth that you're firing. It's pretty pathetic. And the thing about this ability is it doesn't really do a lot of damage. It is magic damage, which is certainly nice, but it also has a relatively high mana cost at low level. It's 3 mana cost per level, 3 mana cost per shot, and honestly, the amount of damage it does is really bad. Now, granted, at a low level, like if you're dealing with, say, like normal difficulty, you know, like Cold Plains monsters, you can probably kill monsters relatively easy, but you don't really have a lot of mana to spam the ability in the first place. Now, granted, if you can find some way to restore your mana quickly enough, it does function good enough that you can usually kill most targets with it with relative ease. And, of course, my Holy Freeze Doom mercenary over here is murdering everything for me. But as you level it up, it increases in the number of teeth that it has. So it's going to go from 2 teeth to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, and so forth and so on. And the number of teeth, unfortunately, don't really help you out all that much. Because, unfortunately, it does not actually scale in damage with the number of teeth like you would think it would. So, for instance, if you were, say, a multi-shot Amazon, a lot of people assume this with the multi-shot Amazon as well, is that when you fire your multi-shot, you know, you got like 10 arrows, they assume that, you know, you could maybe hit one monster with more than 1 arrow at a time, like maybe 5 or 6 arrows. But the thing is you can't hit the monsters with more than 1 arrow at a time. And you can't hit the monsters with more than 1 tooth at a time. Which means that the ability honestly should really just be called Tooth, because you can only hit any monster 1 time. That's it. They're just like in your mind when you think about this ability, you got to be thinking like, oh, well, I just shot like 30 teeth out and the dude's got like 6 of them like in his face. But no, he only ever has 1 tooth in his face because he can only ever be hit by 1 tooth at a time. And this makes the ability only good for killing large groups of monsters and never the single target. So when you're like out in the you know, like the game and you're shooting off teeth at multiple targets, you know, yeah, you can dish out damage to all of the monsters. But the problem is that when you're shooting the teeth at one monster, like even if you have, say, you know, like the highest level of the ability possible, so even if you dump in 20 points and you've got 21 teeth coming out of this ability, you can still only hit the monster 1 time. And this is, of course, completely different than other abilities, like Charge Strike on the Amazon can actually land all of its charged bolts on the same target. Same thing with the Charged Bolt on the Sorceress ability. Throat is so scratchy today. Now, this means that even fully synergized, even with the maximum number of points that Teeth can possibly have, the damage output on it is relatively poor. And to beef this thing up, you're going to need to put points in just about everything. I mean, the number of skill points that you need to max out Teeth is absolutely insane. And no one is maxing out Teeth. I hate to say it. No one is building their character specifically for Teeth. You might build your character specifically for Bone Spear. You might build your character specifically for Bone Spirit. And even in the odd chance that you would want to build your character specifically for Teeth, it's probably going to be PvP related. But even with full synergies, as you can see, we're still only doing 299 to 403 per tooth, which means it's just terrible. Especially when you consider that Bone Spear is doing 1,509 per Bone Spear, and it also pierces. And that's another thing about Teeth. They don't pierce. So once they hit a target, they are immediately nullified. Once that tooth hits a target, it's gone. Now, once we put in our skill points, once we have all our plus to skill equipment going on, let me go ahead and throw some points into strength here so I can actually show you kind of how this works. You got all your plus to skill equipment, your torch, you've got your Annie, you know, you've got everything that you could possibly throw on this character. Once you've got everything, the damage of Teeth is still relatively unimpressive at 1,157. So you're still doing relatively no damage by comparison to the other abilities. Bone Spear is now doing 4,950 per spear, and Bone Spirit is now doing 5,920 per shot. So, you know, comparatively, we're talking about next to no damage from this ability, especially since it can only hit one tooth at a time on each target. Now, in PvP, I have heard that even though it doesn't really do a lot of damage, because of the massive number of teeth and the fact that it spreads out so much, and, you know, there's so many individual teeth, spamming it in random directions can net you a pretty nice amount of damage, especially since there's no resistance to magic damage. And that's kind of a cool thing, a cool aspect, is that there's no damage to, you know, magic damage at all, or no resistance to magic damage. So Teeth will still do its full 1,157 damage on most targets. There are a few targets in the game that do have magic resistances, like Uber Diablo, Pandemonium Diablo, you know, like Mephisto, Uber Mephisto, things like that. But for the most part, as you're like just running around in the Bloodmoor, or, you know, any random zone that's not like an Uber area, it's going to do its full damage. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to Teeth, you have to have it for the synergy for Bone Spear, Bone Spirit, and if you want the full damage output, because you get 8% magic damage per level from Teeth, which means that even if you have no intention of ever using Teeth, even if it like doesn't even ever wind up as a hotkey on your bar, you're probably still going to have to dump 20 points into it to get the maximum bonus for your Bone Spear and your Bone Spirit. And that's really all Teeth comes down to, is that most of the time that's what it gets used for. The synergy for Bone Spear and the synergy for Bone Spirit. Now, there is some limited usefulness for Teeth for speedrunners. Apparently, like, in the early levels of the game, like, pretty much like level 1 to, I want to say, like, level 15, Teeth tends to be extremely useful during that time period because it helps the Necromancer clear out larger groups of monsters with relative ease. And, of course, speedrunners tend to buy as many mana potions as possible. So while they're not necessarily concerned with the mana cost, they're really just concerned with the fact that, hey, I can shoot a bunch of teeth off, and it might potentially do more damage than me, you know, shooting off bone spears or relying on my, you know, my skeletons or my golem to do any damage. And it's basically a speedrunner thing, right? But looking at the mana cost, now that it's level 40 run, it's now 23 mana per cast, which is pretty crazy. It's not even less than Bone Spear. That's the silly thing. At 17 mana cost per Bone Spear, that's actually not bad. Now, Bone Spirit does have a cost of 32, but it also does way more damage than Teeth is ever going to. And Bone Spear does way more damage than Teeth is ever going to as well. especially when you consider the fact that Bone Spear can pierce through, hit multiple targets multiple times. So you're talking about 4,950 times, you know, maybe like 5 pierces, or even more than that, like 6 pierces, I think is what the maximum, because it goes through 5 times, and I think when it hits the last target on the 6th pierce, I think it dies, but I can't remember precisely on that one. I don't know if it functions exactly like the arrows do. And Teeth isn't going to do that. Teeth isn't going to pierce through anything, and as soon as it uses up its original teeth, then it's done. Now, there is some interesting mechanics with Teeth, along with any other ability that is similar to Teeth, so it's important to note that the further away that you click on your character's screen here, and the closer you click, you will determine the variance of how the teeth is fired. So, for instance, if I click really far away over here, you will notice that the teeth spread. And if I click very close to myself, you'll notice that the teeth are now like almost at a complete fan, right? So we've got a very tight pattern, and then we've got the very spread pattern. And you can customize it exactly as you want. Now, this would be a lot cooler if you can actually hit a target multiple times, which you can't. You can't really hit a target multiple times, which is unfortunate. That is actually one way I think that they could fix this ability. And I did say we were going to talk about some ways that they could possibly fix this ability. One way that they could possibly fix this ability is let people shotgun with it. So shotgunning is the process by which you hit a monster multiple times with the same ability in a certain time frame. And because Teeth has a hit delay, a next hit delay, that prevents it from being able to hit a monster twice on the same cast, it will never be able to do that. However, if they were to take away the next hit delay on Teeth, it could potentially be an extremely powerful shotgun ability. Now, this means that you would have to get within very close range of the target to be able to do this. Because if you want to hit them with every single tooth in your teeth, you're going to have to make sure that you're close enough to shotgun them with every single tooth in that particular blast, which makes it a risk-reward scenario skill, and potentially a very damaging one at that. Because if you think about the fact that Teeth has 24 teeth with 1,157 damage per tooth, if we were to pull up a calculator and run this on a quick little numbers game, let's see how much potential damage it could do if you could shotgun with it, right? So let's get our average damage first. So very quickly, we're just going to do 916 plus 1,157. So 916 plus 1,157 gives us 2,073, and then we divide that by 2, which gives us an average damage of 1,036.5. We multiply that by the number of teeth, which is 24 teeth, and we have a total damage output of 24,876 damage per cast, which honestly is not bad. That's not anywhere near as devastating as the ridiculous, like, almost 200,000 damage that comes out of Charge Strike on the Amazon. And I think it would overall fix Teeth as far as an ability that the Necromancer might actually want to utilize past normal difficulty Act 1. This would allow the Necromancer to have a way to dish out a massive amount of damage to a single target, but also in the process put the Necromancer at risk because they would have to get within melee range to use it. Because you have to think about the fact that this ability is not going to do very much damage when you're firing it like this. Even if you can shotgun the ability, if this is how you're firing the ability, it's going to do relatively nothing. However, if you fire it like this, you might hit a target with a couple of them, maybe like 3 or 4 of the teeth, right? And you could potentially do more damage that way. However, if you really want to get the brunt force of the damage out, you're going to have to fire it at point-blank range, and you're going to have to try and hit the target with as many of those teeth as you possibly can. Now, this is also going to, if they did do this, this would also be determined by the size of the monster. So, size 1 monsters, like Spike Fiends and Fallens, are going to get hit by less teeth than a monster like a Pit Lord, which is a size 3 monster. Size 3 monsters definitely get hit by more things at a time. Overall, when it comes to teeth, it's definitely one of the lower ranked abilities on the Necromancer's tree. It doesn't really get used a lot, and as you can tell by the video, there's good reason why. I think we've pretty much covered everything on this, and as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and keep watching.